So the Thin Blue Line out in Memphis, Tennessee, pulled over a guy named Tyre Nichols, which we've got a picture of him right there. Um, Tyre Nichols was stopped by 5 Memphis police officers, 5 black Memphis police officers in a city that is predominantly black, with a black police chief and a black mayor. For people that don't know, by the way, like I don't know if you guys had time to run by Memphis when you guys were down here vacationing, but honestly, Memphis is the asshole of Tennessee, so you don't have to go. No one wants, like, if we could give it to Arkansas, we would, but they're like, no, thank you. Too much demographics, but so anyway, I mean, like, there's Elvis, right? There's Elvis and murder. Yeah. That's what's in Memphis.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And so in a situation where there's definitely an issue of police brutality, but it's really hard to pin this thing on race, because even though the guy who was murdered, Tyre Nichols, is a black man, he was murdered by 5 black cops. All 5 of the cops were black. And yet, of course, the corporate press rushed to still somehow make it into a race issue. You can actually take a look at a headline right here from our friends over at CNN. The police who killed Tyre Nichols were black, but they might still have been driven by racism. That's the face of white supremacy right there. Those pearly whites. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah, right?
The gymnastics.
So one of the things that kind of stood out to me the most when I was just sort of absorbing the whole situation, and by the way, of course, obviously the video is out of the man being literally beaten to death. We're not going to play that on the show. It's easy for you to go find if that's what you're into.
Yeah.
But he died a slow and painful death. They did not shoot him to death. They beat him to death. They beat him to death so mercilessly and bragged about it, joking with each other about all the good licks they got in on this guy while he was handcuffed and on the ground. It kind of makes you wonder, well, what could have saved him? That's sort of my new way of looking at some of these things. Like remember the whole Daniel Shaver thing where he was on his knees in the hallway with his hands up, and the dude who had like "get fucked" written on his AR just blew him away anyway, and it's totally caught on film, and then he totally got away with it, and he's still going to get a pension for the rest of his life even though he's not a cop anymore. What could have saved him if he was unfortunate enough to find himself in that situation? How could he still be alive today? I think that's an important question. An easy answer would be that we don't have a tyrannical police state and they're not beating people to death. But I'm talking about in the world we live in, with him where he is, how could he be alive today? Of course, you're always going to have those right-wing cucks who are going to say, well, just follow the officer's commands. Just comply with what you're told, and then that way bad things won't happen to you. Just comply, Dave. But how do you comply with this? I'm going to read some of this for you. The review of the available footage found that officers shouted at least 71 commands during the approximately 13-minute period before they reported over the radio that Mr. Nichols was officially in custody. By the way, as a quick aside, leave that up, Dave, because we'll read it some more. But just as a quick aside, they initially had put in their reports that he was pulled over for reckless driving. That turned out to be false. So not only are they murderers, they're liars too. But hey, why stop there? The orders were issued at 2 locations, one near Mr. Nichols' vehicle and the other in the area that he had fled to and where he would be severely beaten. The orders were often simultaneous and contradictory. For example, officers commanded Mr. Nichols to show his hands, even as they were holding his hands. They told him to get on the ground, even when he was on the ground. And they ordered him to reposition himself, even when they had control of his body. Meaning that they were just going through the motions, right, of what you're supposed to do as a cop, knowing full well they had no intention of getting off his back. They were going to do what they were going to do to him.
Like NPCs.
Something something else I thought too is that if you have seen the video and then you heard them bragging to one another about how they did what they did, it makes me think, I'm not going to be surprised. This is just conjecture on my part, but I'm not going to be surprised if we find out that there's more to the story as if they knew him. It seemed very personal. Like, don't get me wrong, you know, a D- student who winds up a police officer can do really dumb and violent things without much provocation. Yeah. But it seemed like they were looking to do this to this guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see about that. Of course, we all remember the summer protests following the death of George Floyd and all the burned down auto zones. I mean, we still can't get our freaking brake pads. But fortunately, there haven't been a whole lot of violent protests following the death of Nichols. We actually have a little bit of footage of one of the protests right here.
Oh. I feel like that Eminem is judging them.
We live in a dystopian hellscape.
I can see that in a movie.
This doesn't really have anything to do with Nichols, but just we do.
Yeah.
We're in the Matrix, dude. This can't. All right. So questions arise, of course, as to how a person
and simulation.
Yeah. How can a person remain safe when dealing with unhinged police officers on power trips? Of course, we'll start with first example. So obviously, body cams. Remember when everybody was going nuts about body cams? Well, we got to make all the officers have body cams, and we got to make it an infraction for them to ever have their camera off. Well, you know what? They had body cams on when they gunned down Schaefer. Mm-hmm. There was body cam footage that I'm sure we'll never see when they killed, what was his name? The Second Amendment advocate that they just killed him when he was sleeping in his bed.
Starts with V?
It's too bad that this didn't happen a month ago during the holiday season, because, like, you know, they'll kill you when you're sleeping. They'll kill when you're awake. But these guys had on body cameras. So the point being is, going back to my original point, what could have saved him? The body cameras weren't going to save him. They didn't give a shit. They filmed the whole thing, and they were proud of their work. So that didn't save him. I know a lot of people worry about, like, the whole reaching for your waistband thing, right? Like, well, what if they tell you to show ID, and then that means you have to reach for it? Does that mean they're going to think you're pulling a gun on them, and now they're going to blow 100%. You away, right? So again, they're giving you orders that, like, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. We actually have a helpful video to show how to deal with police officers if they're asking for your ID. Yeah, just as fast as you can.
They appreciate, they're busy guys.
Duncan Limp, that's right, Aaron. Duncan Limp. Also, I always like to point out, because I said, gosh, it's been years at this point. It's been years at this point since we did a cop episode. And I told people I quit talking about every major case of police brutality on the show. Yeah. Because if that's what we did, we would do it every week.
That would be the show.
It would just be, on the beat with Dave and Alan. And it would just be cops beating people to death.
Oh, I see what you did there. Yeah, with on the beat. Okay.
Yeah. Don't steal that idea, y'all.
Copyright.
Yeah.
We're copyrighting.
Yeah, trademark. But something that I used to always bring up every time we did a cop-centric episode, and I'll mention it again here, is, remember that whole thing in the Marjorie Stone Douglas High School down in Florida where the cops just hid outside while there was a gunman inside just shooting all the kids? Yeah. And they were like, oh, well, you don't want to go in there. It's dangerous. You know? There's been several precedents set that the police actually have no obligation to help you, particularly if there's any danger. You can actually take a look at the article right here. This one was from Ryan McMakin at the Mises Institute. Police have no duty to protect you. The federal court affirms yet again. Notice it says yet again. This was just the most recent Supreme Court ruling. It's been affirmed multiple times that police officers are under no requirement to aid you. They can only hurt. And so we keep on going back to that same old thing about good apples and bad apples. And cynical people like us will say, oops, all bad apples, you know. And there's always going to be those defenders that'll say, well, okay, yeah, I mean, maybe these 5 guys are going to go to prison for a long time because they beat a guy to death. But that's just them.
Yeah,
That's
my
just
cousin. He's a good dude.
Yeah, your cousin.
I just made up.
Okay. Okay.
It's a line.
Yeah, right now
I
you're
wouldn't say
yeah, your real cousins right now are calling you up on the phone. Dave, we got a problem? They can only hurt. They are cowards, they are craven. In any situation where they might actually wind up in the line of fire, they're hiding behind their squad cars waiting for you to run out of ammunition. But if you're just somebody trying to get home that's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you say the wrong thing, they will literally beat you to death. And so I come back to finish up this point with that same question from before. How, in what scenario is Tyre Nichols alive today? What does that look like? How could things have unfolded in such a way that he would be alive? I can only think of 2. The first one, the more innocuous one, is we completely dismantled the police state root and stem. You don't have a force, you don't have a standing army, the way the founders always warned, that has a monopoly on violence, that can do things like this to people with nary a fear of repercussion. You think about things like qualified immunity, where as long as they feel, I feared for my life and I was just in the process of doing my job. Well, qualified immunity means so long as they were in the process of doing their job, they can't be held liable for things like this. You can't bring personal suit against them. You can't say, hey, you beat my son to death, I'm going to sue you. No, you can't. Qualified immunity. You get rid of those types of things, you might see a change. The only other way I can think of changing it is to take the myth that all cops are trained on, which is that they are constantly at war with the public, and turn that myth into a reality.
Oh.
I don't know. Anyway.
Been a rough week.